I'm very excited to be here today, especially since I can present with Robert. He's a good friend and obviously a dear colleague to AAMD, and boy, those lights are bright. So the title of the presentation, External and Internal Radiation Oncology Patient Safety, sort of ambiguous because we really weren't sure when we submitted the abstract exactly how this was going to go down. Many of you recently got a survey by email about patient safety culture, and as Nichelle had said, I recently, last year, did a survey among the radiation therapists, and at last year's AAMD conference, Christopher J. Moore, had indicated that if we do it for therapists, we should certainly get a benchmark for where we stand as dosimetrists. And so that was sort of the impetus for the survey that came out in March. And many of you participated in that survey, and I thank you for your participation. And I look forward to presenting to you some of those preliminary results today in this talk. And with that, let me figure out this little, of course, I need the glasses. And we'll go with that. Okay, so today's objectives: to describe current radiation therapy safety initiatives, certainly with ASTRO and AMD, present preliminary results of the recent survey, as I just indicated, discuss some external drivers in healthcare delivery, discuss differences in QA, QC, and CQI, which we probably will not have time to really get into, and those have been touched upon in other talks. Dr. Hancock this morning actually talked extensively about TQM and CQI, so I'm sure some of you already have that. And then Robert is going to present some current initiatives at the University of North Carolina that will illustrate how some of these initiatives can actually play out in the clinic. My disclaimer: I'm old, Robert's older. And so with that, I say that with some seriousness. So this comes from a perspective of someone who has seen the evolution of radiation therapy, and I think that perspective is different than those who are new to the field. And so as that, let's see if I can find the laser pointer here, as this series of isodoses will lend itself, whole brain to conformal to IMRT, we've seen that evolution. Some of you have never been in radiation therapy without IMRT. And so we've seen treatment techniques go from parallel opposed to IMRT. We've seen the introduction of these onboard imaging systems. We've seen electronic medical records. I was so impressed in Scott Green's talk how many of you said you were 100% paperless. Wow, I'm so impressed, because the ones that I know that say they're 100% paperless, they tell me secretly they have more paper than they've ever had before in their lives. And so I think the spectrum of compliance there, when I say, I think that still works in progress. So some of you are probably struggling to let go of that paper, let go of that chart. Maybe you have older physicians. I see a few nods in the audience. You have older physicians who are reluctant to really dig into that electronic medical record, and I think that certainly poses some problems for us going forward. Specialization, again, dosimetrists evolved, right? We have evolved from therapist on the machine, physics assistants. Now we are our own people. We have our own test. We have our own credential. And while that's wonderful and great, I think it's created some silos. It's created some division between the therapist and the physicist and the dosimetrist, and that can cause communication problems. Electronic medical records, while they're great and wonderful, it creates less opportunity for face-to-face discussions. I think it's a lot harder to place blame on people that you are having lunch with every day. You know, I think it's that fear and blame mentality that Dr. Hancock talked about a little bit this morning. When you don't interact with your coworkers, I think it's a lot harder to communicate about not only work-related things, but to really have a civil conversation about what's going on. So with that evolution, you know, I think we've always had patients at the heart of our patient safety, patients have always been the central figure. I think for many years we were so busy evolving, so busy introducing new technology, so busy with new immobilization and new techniques and becoming dosimetrists that somehow things fell through the cracks. Many of you probably remember January or so of 2010, the New York Times splashing articles about radiation mistreatments in New York, and a whole series of things began to tumble after that. So I'll call that the tipping point for us. I think very quickly thereafter, the radiation therapy community as a whole really gathered themselves up and made a forward leap in terms of patient safety. And many of you have experienced that. Many of you have attended some of the initiatives, and certainly the AAMD has participated heavily in those efforts. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those. But I think we had quite the professional response following a congressional hearing at which the ASTRO, APM, and ASRT leaders had to actually testify before Congress, really defending our profession. And so with that, we have really exploded into this patient safety initiatives. Target Safely is the ASTRO initiative, and well, I'm not going to read a whole lot. I did want to share with you sort of the first four. So again, this is very quickly, ASTRO came up with these Target Safely, supporting the development of a national medical error reporting system and a patient safety database for radiation oncology. I'll tell you that those are in the works. They haven't got it all worked out yet, but that's coming. That's certainly a focus of ASTRO's. Testing the compatibility of different radiation oncology equipment vendors through an ASTRO-sponsored initiative dedicated to improving the integration of equipment used in radiation treatment. We saw some of that. The vendors, we cannot move forward without the vendors' input. We cannot move forward without integrating, making sure that their processes meet our process needs. And so we need the vendors. Strengthening radiation oncology practice accreditation with more robust and meaningful measures. ASTRO encourages all radiation oncology practices to participate. Certainly just the last speaker spoke extensively about accreditation, so I won't go on there. Advocating for passage of legislation to require licensing standards for personnel performing radiation treatments known as the CARE Act. How long have we been hearing about the CARE Act? Quite a long time. Chris Gaynor has been our legislative liaison and has kept us apprised of that, but again, it sort of warms my heart to some extent to see that written down in the ASTRO initiatives, that they're supporting our profession moving forward, and we will need that in terms of national accreditation. Along that same line, I'll mention that AAMD is moving forward with its initiative to petition the Bureau of Labor Statistics to make medical dosimetry its own classification. I won't dwell into it too much. I don't want to take up too much time with this talk, but if you're not aware, we are currently a subset of radiation therapists according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So if you try to find a medical dosimetrist in the government, they don't know who we are. And so AAMD is working very hard. 2018 is the next time that we can change that classification system, and so we have your back. We are going to try to petition for our own classification system. So let's see. Image Wisely is the ASRT initiative for radiographers. The Safety Summit happened in June of 2010. Again, Teresa Kwiatkowski was president at that time, and she represented us in Miami for that conference. I'll talk a little bit more about that. The new Blue Book, again, for those of you with a fair amount of experience, the 1991 Blue Book was sort of the guide, the guiding document for staffing levels and that kind of thing, and it had been left untouched for quite some time. And so that initiative to update the Blue Book was made, and you guys now know it as the Safety is No Accident document. Again, Teresa Kwiatkowski, Christopher J. Moore, and Susan Cagle represented AAMD, and as such are co-authors in that document on various chapters, so we're very proud of that. White papers, Astro put forth at least 7 new white papers, and I participated on the IMRT guidance, Dr. Adams on the peer review and the IGRT, and so those are being quickly published in the note. Familiar with the new PRO journal, Practical Radiation Oncology, so they're trying to have that as the one of the mechanisms by which they get this information out to everybody much quicker than, say, the Red Journal. Error reporting and taxonomy. I know Eric Ford out of Johns Hopkins has been working with APM work group on this. And again, if you think about taxonomy language, it's really no different than the ICRU units we use. It's GTV, CTV, PTV. If we don't have a common language, it's going to be very difficult to talk about errors. If what you call a misadministration is not what I call a misadministration, how are we ever going to figure out how much of that's going on? And so in terms of the error reporting languages, they're working on taxonomy that would be universally acceptable, much like the NRC, for those of you who are involved in brachytherapy, very well defined in terms of reportable, recordable misadministration, so that we can have a conversation around that, and we're comparing apples to apples going forward. Finally, an outcomes database, which is coming to a Walmart nearby. I don't know when that will come. It can't come without electronic medical records, so I don't know how far out we are. Dr. Adams may have more information on that than myself, but it's certainly one of their initiatives. Briefly, this was the call to action safety summit in Miami, which Teresa attended. There were over 400 attendees, and ultimately they came up with 20 recommendations, 10 of which I just want to go over very quickly in terms of, this was in 2010, and many of these initiatives have already been acted upon, which I think is pretty speedy for our profession as a whole to get to. User groups have been going on for years, but there's a new focus on that. Certainly our lunchtime TPS workshops help with some of that. Develop recommended staffing levels. Again, that was taken care of with the Blue Book, the new Blue Book, Safety is No Accident. Facilities to use root cause analysis to identify and correct errors. You will hear, if you are not already a manager, I'm sure your manager has used either the term FEMA or root cause analysis, because this is the way of the, it's not really the way of the future, it's what Deming talked about 70 years ago, but somehow it's just getting to us. So Dr. Hancock had spoken a little bit about the root cause analysis as well. Error reporting systems should be developed. That's works in progress. Interestingly, in the survey that I sent out, 85% of you said, yes, we have a formalized error reporting system at our facility. 10% of you said, no, we do not have an error reporting system. That leaves 5% who don't know. That's a little frightening. I can understand, yes, we have it, no, we don't, but to not know whether you have an error reporting system leaves me with a little bit of pause. Covenant and commitment to safety should be expected by all team members. Again, this is very similar to the environment and the culture which Dr. Hancock had talked about this morning in terms of being able to move forward as a group. You have to all have a commitment to the safety. Other 5 more recommendations. Any team member can declare a timeout. If any of you have read Checklist Manifesto, you can know that we have borrowed heavily from the surgical arena, and many radiation therapy departments are incorporating timeouts as an opportunity to stop the action, make sure that the patient is the right patient and that what we're about to embark upon is correct, and so that you have a independent set of eyes double checking this. Audits should be performed. Again, when I think of an audit, I usually think of something after it's been done. we have to kind of rethink that and include peer review in that, and that can be a prospective type of audit. Patient safety should be a competency. So it'll be interesting as to whether SROA and other groups start to make this part of your personnel job description. Safety champions should be present. I would say all of you should be safety champions. I don't think it has to be your job description or your title. I think we can all be safety champions. And finally, treatment team qualifications must be consistent and recognized nationally. Again, this is coming back to the CARE bill. This is coming back to us establishing ourselves as our own classification system with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So what is patient safety culture? And finally, why do we care? The AHRQ, the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, defines it this way: the values, beliefs, and norms about what is important in an organization and what attitudes and behaviors related to patient safety are supported, rewarded, and expected. Okay? So that's their definition of it. And so the characteristics of patient safety we'll get to in just a minute, but I did want to at least tell you that the single most important predictor of whether you have a patient safety culture is your current organizational culture, knowing whether you're going to be successful with those patient safety initiatives. In other words, is the environment ripe for having a culture of patient safety? Are there champions in the department? Are there willing and open means of communication? So we want to establish a framework within which we can justify change and demonstrate positive results. I look at it as a benchmark, right? We need to, before we can move forward, we have to know where we are. And so if we establish some benchmark, just like with your DVHs, just like you can't say that you've improved the plan if you haven't shown what you had originally. So I think this is, for us, this survey in March of 2013 shows where dosimetrists currently stand in terms of a patient safety culture. And from there we can move forward and we can show growth and we can perhaps improve upon that. So characteristics of a patient safety culture that we would say is positive would be employees that take action when problems arise. Safety is seen as the responsibility of all employees at all levels, and that there's a shared sense of teamwork and communication drives the institution. Safety is a priority and the employees are not afraid to report adverse events. So how many of you feel like you work in a place like this? How many of you wish you worked in a place like this? Okay. You know, I think this is wonderful, and I was so thrilled to see so many hands go up. But I think we would readily acknowledge that we know of a few places that perhaps have toxic environments or that fear and blame type environment that Dr. Hancock alluded to. That is not an environment in which patient safety is going to rule. That is an environment in which I'm going to look out for me. Right? So getting to the actual survey now, we sent out the actual AHRQ validated survey, but Chris Moore and myself created another section that dealt specifically with peer review, and we also changed a bit of the language to reflect more of what a dosimetrist does, because the AHRQ survey was really geared for hospitals and for hospital units, as they termed them. I think maybe we just think we're special because we are. But we wanted to have a little bit more information in addition to the survey as it was presented. So over 3,000 medical dosimetrists received an email in March, and I think initially I got about 268 or so responses. And so about a month later, we sent out a second direct email, and my final numbers were 473 responded. So that gave us about a 13% response rate, which all in all for a survey is not too bad. would have liked to have seen it higher. And even though unit and hospital level data was obtained, I'm really only going to talk about unit level, so your department level data. And the average respondent, so most of the ones that responded were somewhere between 41 and 50. Most were female. I believe it was about 65% were female. 92% were full-time. All but 7 respondents were certified medical dosimetrists. Most had a bachelor's degree, and this was sort of the kicker for me, most had over 20 years of experience. So certainly I think that this survey could be skewed away from our younger dosimetrists, just in that most of the respondents were over 20 years experience, which also made them, let's see, in terms of age, when I combined them, 78% of the respondents were over 41 years of age. So certainly, either the younger ones didn't have time to respond to the survey, or maybe the older ones are just very engaged at this point. And then most also came from a hospital, community hospital. We believe it was about 51%. So that was just our average respondent. That we had a good sampling, but this was, if I had to make a single person, it would be this. So the AHRQ survey measures 12 different dimensions of patient safety culture. And the way they do that, there's, I believe it's about 75 questions. And so they group different questions together to determine the dimension of patient safety culture. So I'm going to present 12 of them here. Teamwork within units, supervisor or manager promotes patient safety, organizational learning or quality improvement or continuous quality improvement, management support for patient safety, overall perceptions of patient safety, feedback and communication about error, communication openness, frequency of event reported, teamwork across units, staffing, non-punitive response to errors. In the essence of time, I'm going to only speak about a few of them. So I've got some data to present to you about these 4. So strengths and weaknesses that came out of the survey, really only one dimension, being teamwork within units, made the 75% benchmark of response. 75% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed that they had good teamwork within the unit. So that would be within your dosimetry unit. Weaknesses, we did not have any of the dimensions classified as a weakness on our part, but I did want to point out that one individual question where we asked about is a listing of almost errors or near misses readily available to you, only 53.5% of you said that that was never or rarely available. And so that was the only individual question that sort of was on the weak side. So dimensions of patient safety culture, organizational learning, feedback and communication, and then the other ones I will also present. So organizational learning was made up of these questions. These were presented to you on a 5-point Likert scale. We are actively doing things to improve patient safety. Mistakes have led to positive changes here, and after we make changes to improve patient safety, we evaluate their effectiveness. 70% of the respondents agreed or strongly agreed with these statements. And so while that is a wonderful, almost the 75% that calls it a strength, I always have to think about the 30% who don't believe that that is happening at their facility. So again, in all of these, I think we have to think about where do we have room to improve. Feedback and communication about errors. We are given feedback about changes put into place based on event reports. We are informed about errors that happen in this unit. In this unit, we discuss ways to prevent errors from happening again. Now, I want to speak a little bit about this. The middle one, we are informed about errors that happen in this unit. Obviously, that can happen in a number of ways. That can happen in terms of a stick. You know, they're going to beat you up a little bit about, we're going to inform you that it happened all right. And so that was a strong 85% of you said, yes, we're informed about the errors. Obviously, I don't have any individual knowledge about how that's presented. I would hope it's in a warm and fuzzy manner. But only 45% indicated that they're given feedback about changes put into place. So I think knowledge without feedback is not the environment we want to have. Being told that there's been a mistake, but then providing no feedback for it is not really what we want to see happen. So even with that, 71% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that this was the case in their particular unit. Overall perceptions of safety, patient safety is never sacrificed to get more work done. Our procedures and systems are good at preventing errors from happening. It's just by chance that more serious mistakes don't happen around here. We have patient safety problems in this unit. So obviously the last two are reverse coded. So don't think when I put up 70-something% agreed, they did not agree that it's just by chance they have more serious mistakes. So that is reverse coded. And 72% would say that they have a good perception of safety in their unit. Frequency of events reporting. So how often is it reported when a mistake is made and the following happens? Either it's caught and corrected before affecting the patient, it's caught but there's no potential to harm the patient, or it could harm the patient but it didn't. So 63% agreed or strongly agreed with this series of statements. That may have something to do with the 5% who didn't know if they had an error reporting system to report to. I'm not quite sure. And then we also asked the number of events that they themselves had reported in the past 12 months. So we didn't ask how many occurred or were reported in your unit, but how many you yourself had reported. And these were the results. 61% 0, 1 or 2, 30%. So you can see right away, 91% were 2 or less, leaving only 10% with 3 up to greater than 20. I think this probably has something to do with our taxonomy. You know, if we don't know what we're calling an error, if we don't know what we're calling a near miss, if we don't know what we're calling a misadministration, it's hard to report it. It's going to be difficult for the 10% who don't have a formalized reporting structure to report it as well. So only 85% of respondents actually had a system in which to report. A unit patient safety grade. So one of the things we asked for respondents to do is to grade their unit. And surprisingly, 87% gave themselves an A or a B, leaving 13% with a C or less, or worse, I guess we could say. In talking to Robert during the day today, he said, well, how many people would want to eat at a place that had a sanitation C grade or below? Probably not too many. Probably don't think our patients deserve better than a C. So clearly, from these results, we have some room to improve. Safety champion, again, one of the questions was, who is designated in your department as the safety champion, or who's in charge of patient safety? You can see 46% were physicists, 33% managers, 8% radiation oncologists, with another 11% being other. I'll be honest, I haven't had a chance to really delve into the free text answers to know who the 11% other may be. How many of you have your physicist, you would say your physicist is in charge of the patient safety? How about your manager? And then finally, radiation oncologist. Okay, so that sort of pans out, I have to say. There was only 1 or 2 that had radiation oncologists as their, but with a pretty even split between managers and physicists. Peer review. Again, peer review has been a special interest of mine, and certainly Dr. Adams, as he has presented on peer review over the past 5 years at numerous conferences, and has certainly published a couple of papers. Christopher J. Moore developed some of these questions so that we could get some idea of how dosimetrists viewed their peer review or their opportunity for peer review in their unit, and to get their actual definitions of what they believe peer review is, because we certainly believe that that's sort of an ambiguous term that not every dosimetrist has a good handle on. So these are what we asked. Do you have an active peer review process in place? I feel free to compliment and/or respectfully criticize the efforts of my colleagues. Peer review often leads to a new approach to a completed plan. Other radiation oncology personnel participate in our peer review. Appropriate time each week is allocated for peer review. And finally, peer review seems unimportant to our radiation oncologists and physicists. Over 50% responded most of the time or always. So about half had some feel for peer review in their department. This is clearly an area in which we can help, I believe. I think by publishing articles about peer review, it's certainly going to come up as part of accreditation peer review. And so I also wanted to share with you some of the answers that we got to this question. What is your understanding of peer review in dosimetry? We got this very nice definition from someone. It's an evaluation of plans, calculations for integrity, accuracy, and optimization of techniques. So we thought of the ones that had submitted answers, this was a pretty good answer. It doesn't give us the who and the how it's going to happen, but certainly they had a good concept of what it should be. There was a number of comments from places that have a single dosimetrist institution, and many of them said this: with only one dosimetrist, there is no peer review. And I think that's probably a common, maybe knee-jerk reaction, or just that's how they feel, that's how it is. And I think that is certainly something that we can work on. It's something that was discussed earlier in the week in terms of at least contouring QA, being able to have benchmarks about what contouring can be. But this is clearly an area where we have a lot of work ahead of us. There was comments about what kind of atmosphere it would require before they felt good about peer review. Again, peer review with the idea of punishment or some kind of punitive measure is not going to be readily accepted by dosimetrists. Physicians have done peer review for years and years and years. Yes, they get beat up a little bit, but in the end, they're still working. And I think we have to go on that premise that it is to make us better and better, and that it is there to catch and improve plans. So the desire for an unbiased and without punitive intent came up a number of times in the comments. I think understandably so. So I just wanted to recap patient safety culture as a whole. Again, patients are the #1 priority, and while I think we all have that at our heart, there are always processes that seem to get in the way, plans that have to be cranked out, and it just seems that there's not enough time in the day. And somehow it has to be elevated to a priority. And you're going to have that safety champion in your department who's going to say, no, we're going to take the time. We have to take the time to make this a priority. Because we're way beyond simple QA checks of yesteryear. And the magnitude of errors, whether it's a one-time error we can deal with, when it's the systematic error that can crop up and kind of hide below all of the everything, and we only catch it at the end of a series or a course of therapy. Those are the ones that are scary. Those are the ones that are perhaps have a huge impact on the patient. And then the concept of peer review and where we're going to go with that. The culture of safety, that safe environment, non-punitive conversation, mature adults talking about patient safety and what has to happen around that. Providing that feedback is a critical piece, and sharing that information beyond your little department. I mean, yes, you can learn from it, but if the community, the radiation therapy community is to learn from it, we have to find a way to share those ideas through presentations or through formalized mechanisms somehow, so that those same types of errors don't happen outside of your little facility or your big facility. So what kind of implications does patient safety have for this? Certainly the care bill, federal oversight. I'm sure when that congressional hearing occurred in 2010, in the back of all their minds is, are we going to lose our ability to be independent practitioners? Much in the way that the NRC has complete oversight of radioactive materials, is the federal government going to take over and have complete oversight of non-brachytherapy radiation? So I think by showing our initiatives, by really embracing the patient safety ideas, we will, the national databases for error reporting, there's conversation as to whether that's going to be voluntary, is it going to be anonymous? If it's not anonymous, are you going to have published patient safety grades for different institutions? So I think there's a lot of that fear. There's a lot of that uncertainty about what this is going to mean if we have a national error reporting system. How are you going to handle that? Make it so that it's improving patient care without jeopardizing me. And so that outcomes database, and then certainly the ASTRO standards, which are currently being revised. Dr. Adams is actually on that committee, and with that, I think I'm going to turn the talk over to Robert, and he will talk to you a bit more about the practice standards and where that's heading, and then give you some information about the UNC initiatives. Okay.
Well, thank you, Melanie. I wanted to publicly thank Melanie to put something like this together. She's working full-time. She's working on her PhD, and she also has a child and a husband. And this takes hundreds of hours. You see this presentation, and it looks rather easy. But to put the questions together, to make sure the study is valid and reliable, to have a study of this magnitude nationally takes a lot of money, a lot of time. And I wanted, if you don't mind, it's afternoon and everyone's tired, could we give her a hand as a dosimetrist in this? I also wanted to publicly thank her for leaving me 8 minutes to give my talk. And it is late, and I want everyone to know I do have the clock up here. I'm not going to go over. I had 34 slides, and I'm not going to do them. I'm going to talk for 8 minutes, and I'm going to tell you about something that's going to happen to each of you. We've heard a lot about past, retrospective. We've heard a lot about things that are currently going on. I want to talk about the future, and I'm making it objective. This is not a subjective statement that I'm getting ready to make. As Melanie alluded, I've just come off of an ASTRO committee. This ASTRO committee was put together a year ago, somewhat secretively, to put together accreditation standards for all radiation therapy facilities in the United States. We just met in Chicago last week for our final meeting. Everything we've put together has gone for public comment. The Chicago meeting was to come back with those and write the final standards and put the language together. It is now going before the board of directors of ASTRO, and it will be presented at the ASTRO in Atlanta in about 90 days. So for dosimetrists, I feel this is an opportunity. You want to take something back home with you, this is going to be an opportunity that's going to come your way. There are 18 standards that are written, and it's not finalized because the board will have to approve it. In those 18 standards, we're looking at doing some wonderful things for radiation therapy to become accredited. There's peer review, and not just peer review for physicians, peer review for physicists, medical dosimetrists, and radiation therapists. There are 5 sections. One of the sections is culture of patient safety that I know you've heard a lot about. But what makes this different is that you're not going to be evaluated on someone coming in and saying we're due 3 meetings a year, and so we are a safe department. You're going to have to prove that you have a culture of patient safety. There are 3 different sections on that. As a medical dosimetrist, this is a great opportunity. My guess is in the next 12 months, all of you are going to attend a meeting in your department, and they're going to talk about this. You may not want to listen to me on this, and I know it's late and you're blocking it out, but this is what I think is going to happen in the future. I think accreditation is going to be tied in with reimbursement from CMS, that ASTRO is going to become the accrediting body. CMS is now giving grants of $100,000 for anyone that can come up with an idea to improve quality, to improve patient safety. And ASTRO is going to be that person, that group doing that. So you may be thinking, this guy's up there talking, and my doctor will never do this, my group will never do this. Well, this year CMS tried to cut reimbursements 38%, 15% was negotiated from that. We all know and we all hear about Obamacare. We all go to work and we hear rumblings about less for reimbursements. We all hear this. It's the elephant in the room that we don't talk about. So think in your department. This accreditation thing comes up. It's presented at ASTRO this year. They will be doing beta testing at the end of this year and early next year, and then it's going to come forth. And think when they find out 3 years from now, probably, that if you are accredited, you get 15% more on your CMS charges. If you're not accredited, you get 15% less opportunity. When you go to the meeting and they talk about this, don't be thinking, I can't wait till this meeting's over so I can go back to my cave and plan some more. I want you to think, how can I contribute to this as a medical dosimetrist? You guys have a great opportunity to be heard. The oncologists are not going to know how to do this. The physicists, we know the curriculum they had. The education that the dosimetrists have is much more broad-based, and you have the opportunity, especially in the patient safety, especially in the peer review. And one of the things I would advocate you do, it is 5:16, 4 minutes. One of the things I would advocate you do is, there'll be on there, you will see what we've done at the University of North Carolina. I had 34 slides. But what is key when you watch it, when you go look at the slides, there are 4 different sections. And what you need to see is that everything we did had a metric. And that's what's going to be so important. When we did safety rounds, there's a metric. When we did peer review, there are metrics. And that's going to be the key. And you as a dosimetrist, you understand about metrics. So when these different methodologies are being created of how do you have safety in your department, how do you do peer review, look at this stuff and say, I can do this. This is not rocket science. Tell your leaders, I can lead this. I know how to do this. Let me be part of this. Let me be part of this accreditation. Make yourself of more value. Can you imagine the value you're going to give if you do this and you become part of this team, which is going to be very progressive kind of thinking that is not really in our culture, and you're going to be part of that. Think of the extra value you're going to add. Think of how valuable the administrators are going to look upon you and what you do. So, it's coming. It is coming. It just happened in Chicago last week. It's before the board, which will vote on it in the next 2 weeks to do the final language, and it's going to be presented at ASTRO. If you're at ASTRO, on the Saturday of ASTRO, They are going to have a presentation of this, and they're going to be looking for site visitors. What a great way to go to learn about the 18 different headings, the 82 objectives, and what they're going to try to do. I advocate that you look upon this not with disdain, not with, oh, it's one more thing, I want to go back to my life, that you look upon it as an opportunity. And one of the things I wanted to talk about today was to present that to you. This is brand new. And all of you are going to hear about this. It will soon be released into the media, and you will soon hear about it from the Astro sites. And with that, I think the stampede is going to begin at 7 o'clock. And again, Robert Adams, University of North Carolina, Melanie Dempsey, Virginia Commonwealth. You got to hear the valedictorian a lot longer than you did me, and that's good. Are there any questions? We have 2 minutes. Oh, we have to 5:30.
No. But you guys wouldn't mind getting out.
You wouldn't mind getting out?
I will say that while I only touched on a few of the responses from the survey, I do plan to provide the AAMD with a full report, which we'll put on the website so that you can delve through some of that yourself. That'll be forthcoming. I'm also hoping to get an article in the Medical Dosimetry Journal, or maybe even Practical Radiation Oncology, so that this information can be shared. It's really going to be a hot topic moving forward, as you can see. So